Let's get into this topic. Once again, my name is Jeff Fritz. I am a principal program manager on the .NET team. I work on Visual Studio Code, .NET, and specifically right now I have a focus on .NET Aspire. We're gonna talk about this new framework, this new set of tools that we can use to make building your applications easier, and importantly, I like to say, we're going to give you opinionated configuration for the things that you don't want to build, but you know you need, right? So let's talk about this. So .NET Aspire was announced back in November of 2023 as part of a but one more thing type of announcement at .NET Conf 2023. And it was announced, it was put out there as a preview, a lot of folks jumped on it. And this idea of I need to Aspireify my application started circulating, and folks started using this term. And I thought, that's a great name for a website. And literally in the green room at .NET Conf, as we're presenting and working on the event, I went to namecheap.com and I reserved the domain name Aspireify.net. And I thought this would be a great place for us to create a news website. So something that's not a big lift, it's kind of easy for us to understand. It's not too complex, but we can build a news website using .NET Aspire. And that's what I did, and that's what you'll find if you go to Aspireify.net. You'll find this website. I can't share the source code to it because I bought the design. So because it's a commercial design that I'm using, I can't make the source code available. But I can share all kinds of concepts and things and show you the source code that goes into making this thing work. So Aspireify, quite literally, is a website about .NET Aspire that is built with .NET Aspire. So .NET Aspire gives us a way to stitch together these other resources that we need to build our application systems. Because let's face it, you don't just have a web project. You've got a web project that connects to a database. And maybe it uses some blob storage. It might be Azure Blob Storage, it might be S3 storage, it might be some other storage that you're using with a hosting provider like DigitalOcean. See that? I can reference and call out to the sponsors. Just kind of slide that into the presentation. Okay, so in the case of Aspireify, I reference and I have 4 other features that I bring into the mix to run this website. I use Azure Storage, particularly Azure Storage Tables, so that I can have a list of here's all of my articles. It doesn't need to be sophisticated. I need to be able to just search and return, here's the latest articles, or group and organize by a category. I have a resize service that I created because there's thumbnails I want to grab from the various news articles that I post. And let's face it, you don't want to wait for all of these thumbnails to load from all these different websites all over. So what I've done is I wrote a little service that runs as a background process that when a new article is added, it grabs that thumbnail, resizes it, optimizes it to WebP format, and saves it into blob storage so that we can serve that with some aggressive caching on the headers, and it loads very quickly in your browser. I added Azure AI Search because, let's face it, what's a news website if you can't search it for the types of content that you want to see? So I added a text box at the top and reference Azure AI Search. Finally, Azure Cache for Redis. I want to be able to output cache all of this content because news content doesn't change. Once it's written, it's out there. I don't have to recreate those pages again and again and again. I can output cache that content, stuff it into Redis, and don't think about it again. My web server then is doing nothing, right? It just sits there and pulls stuff out of Redis cache, and you get content in single-digit milliseconds. Folks then think it is a fast, amazing website that was built with React, or it's all statically generated, and they don't know the difference that it's actually Blazor that's generating that content. So let's take a look. I'm going to take you on a tour of the code of what makes this thing run. And I am completely offline here. I am not connected to the network. So I'm going to show you how I run and build in a developer workflow, not connected out to the internet, so that you can see a little bit of how these pieces fit together for a real website. And then we'll get into talking about how we do deployment and some of those other interesting bits. So let's go open Open the Aspireify source code. I'm going to use Microsoft Visual Studio. Here is that. I'll change my theme to light mode to make it a little bit easier for everybody to see here. See that? I remember from last time. Give it 1 second here to load, and we'll do all the font size gimmickry and whatnot. There we go. Thank you. Theme. Thank you. Give me blue. Blue. How's that? Better? Fantastic. All right. Let's just run this so you can see what this looks like, and we'll dive into the individual pieces here, because I've done some things to optimize how I manage the resources that compose this application, and they're a little bit interesting to dive into. So this is running on .NET Aspire 9.2, and you can see my collection of resources here. I'm going to zoom out just a smidge so you can see the last couple items down there on the left, and it's just slightly, mostly out of focus. All right, fine, I'll zoom in. Make it a little bit easier to read. Right? Is that fuzzy, or is it just me? Okay. Is that me, or is that the projector? Projector? Okay, terrific. All right, and here I thought, wow, my contacts are going bad. Let me go through a couple of the items here. I'll start from the bottom. The website is down here at the bottom. I have a couple other resources here. I have some functions that run in the background. These are Azure functions that are designed and run as with Q triggers to do that image resizing capability. I also have a counter in there, so I can count the number of times that folks view different articles. I have my database migration service, so that as I make changes to the application, to my database structure, it'll automatically update and maintain my database schema. I have Azure Storage, and this is running inside of a container here. Check that out. So you see it is the Azure Write container that is being referenced, and there's a couple of URLs that make up where that's running locally for me to be able to develop against. So running and integrating with, in this case, Docker desktop containers. I have Postgres running out here that's managing a database that has my users, only admin users at this point, that are able to connect in and log into the application. I have my output cache running here. This is Redis, so you can see that is a Redis container there. There you go, Redis container. But I've also added Redis Insight here, so I can browse into my cache and actually see, here's the things that I've generated that are sitting out there. So I can click in and see, here's the content that's necessary for this article, but also when I start output caching, that content will appear in here as well, and I can go and interact with it, inspect what's been written, flush the cache, all of that good stuff. So having that Redis Insight sitting there is very valuable. And then the function storage that Azure needs to manage the Azure functions. Because I have all of these things built and referenced and included in here with relationships to each other, .NET Aspire also gives me a really cool graph that we can take a look at here that shows me all the resources of my application system and how they work together. With the website in here in the middle in chocolate brown, a lovely shade of chocolate brown. Sure. But you can see how the website references my output cache. It references the migration service, references the security database, and so on and so forth. This is generated for me based on my .NET Aspire configuration. I don't have to go and tell it, connect all these lines. Because I'm building my application, .NET Aspire will manage and create this resource graph for me. Of course, I've got all my structured logs over here so I can see how things are interacting with each other. I've got traces that are over here as well, and metrics so that I can peek in and see how well some of my capabilities are happening over here. If we look at open connections, there's a couple of background processes that are running on the website. Let me zoom in and actually launch the website. So here it is, localhost 7199, and I have my content. And it presents it and loads very quickly on screen. If I go back over here to my traces, I can see, here's how it gets the thumbnail and all the processes it goes through, what's taking the most amount of time to make those requests. I can back up a little bit. Let me go back to the website. Let's back up just a little bit. Look at all that content being saved into output cache. So I can bounce around in here and learn exactly what's going on. There you go. There's my 22 items. So setting up output cache for a bunch of stuff, going and getting thumbnails to present on screen for this initial page. So that's very handy. I can jump into a videos category here, and there's all the things necessary to make up that video page. Now, I don't generate thumbnails for YouTube. So most of these are YouTube thumbnails. So instead of me generating it, there's an error handler in here that says, I can't get to YouTube. Just show the default triangle thumbnail here for these various articles. So that's the nickel tour around the features. Let's take a look at how some of this comes together and how you can build a real website. And it starts with the app host, right? Inside .NET Aspire, we have this project called App Host. Let me show you the Solution Explorer, and I'll put the tabs across the top. Save some space here. So we have the App Host project. This is where we define the orchestration of our Aspire project, and here's all the pieces that go together in making this. So we start off with a program CS that has that top level set of statements that define how our application is structured. And of course, is Steve Smith here? No. Good. I'm using regions as part of this, and Steve hates regions.
I do too, Fritz, I do too.
So here's the thing. When you've got all of these things that you want to configure in a top-level file, having regions makes it really easy to see this block of code works on this feature. This block of code works on that feature. It's 70 lines of code, and it was actually much longer. So it makes it a little bit easier to see how these things fit together. But what I've done as I've grown the application is I've started to use extension methods to hide some of this common logic in other files. So here, for example, add Aspireify storage is sitting here inside this class file with all the logic necessary to set up my storage. So I'm going to add Azure Storage and run it as an emulator. So it's going to run inside of a Docker emulator, and I want to make sure that I have a data volume that I allocate, right? Inside of Docker, we have data volumes that persist data between runs of that container. So by doing that, I can be sure when I look at the test website here that the thumbnails that I've persisted are always there when I restart my application locally. Make sense? So that's pretty cool, easy way for me to do that. So instead of having a region that was 40-some lines of code here, I've now simplified it to one line of code inside this file. And because I've given it a descriptive name there, it makes it easier to see and manage these things. Because before, I had blocks that look like this. Hey, add Redis. So Redis is inside of an integration, we call it. It's a NuGet package that has definitions for the Redis container and features we want to light up inside of the application. So I add Redis. I want to make sure that when I'm working with this in development mode, it doesn't constantly restart the container. Can I tell you how long we used to wait in older versions of Aspire for all of our containers to stop when we stopped our application? And when you go and make some changes, you want to test and see if it works again, and you have to wait for all these containers to start back up again. Don't have to do that when you start using a lifetime and you specify persistent. If you want it to restart every time, you can also give it session lifetime so that you get a fresh instance of your database, your Redis cache, whatever it is you might be using. Maybe you're using some queuing mechanism. You can always be sure you get a fresh instance when you start your application by saying that it has session persistence. I also set up to publish my Redis connection as a connection string, and here's why. When we go to publish our applications right now, and it's slowly changing as we get through Aspire 9.2 here. Right now, it's going to publish all of your Aspire resources as containers. And we'll see that in a little bit. When I get to Azure, I already have a Redis cache that's provisioned and running out there. The smallest Redis cache you can get on Azure using the Azure cache for Redis is 256 meg. The size of the Redis cache that's running right now for this application is 2. This application's been running for a year and a half. It's got 400 or 500 articles, and I'm using 2 megabytes of memory in my Redis cache. And the smallest cache I can buy from Azure is 256 meg. I don't need more. I don't need to deploy it. I'm just fine using my little 2 megabytes of memory, and I can keep reusing that same cache that's out there on Azure. Taking a look here, so I also specify with Redis Insight, we have this same feature around a number of our database capabilities where, it's not that one. I'll jump over here, where you can specify that web-based admin capability and have it lit up inside of another container locally so you can inspect and see what's going on here. I turn on PG admin. Over in the other one, I turn on my Redis Insights so that I can inspect and keep an eye on what's actually being written into my cache, right? Tinker with it, delete items, flush it, whatever I might need to do. Having Redis Insight running inside .NET Aspire, real easy for us to use, and it will not be published when you go to publish your application out to Azure or wherever it is that your production space might be. Maybe you're using the bookstore and their cloud, right? Okay. So anyways, so I've started isolating and breaking these things down into smaller parts. I have this data migration service that is important to show you. We're starting to help folks move away from this structure. So there's this problem we have where when the applications start, yeah, that's fine. You need to be able to do migrations. Yeah, here we go. You need to be able to do migrations on your database so that the schema that you're targeting matches what your website is written with, right? Entity Framework has a real great capability to allow you to generate those migration files and copy them along. So what I've done is I have a background service that runs that will go grab my security context, my database context, and run all of the migrations. If there's no new migrations, this does a no-op, and it stops the application at that point. Pretty easy to build, to have out here. Microsoft want to make this simpler so that you don't need to have extra services that are migrating your database. So we're working to improve this capability inside of .NET Aspire. But this is how, when I add new features to the database, I get it promoted and rolled out to Azure. I've also done, do I have it here? Yes. Inside .NET Aspire, we have a lot of magic strings for things. So let me go back to app host and show you one of these. Here inside the web server, let me see, passing my keys around, my search. There's a bunch of with reference things in here, or names of things. Did I put it? Where did I put it? Ah. So here, I have like the name of the Redis cache. I put it inside of a constant called services.cache. And I have a common library down here that has the names of these services hard-coded so that inside of app host, I can refer to a constant, a C# constant. And I'm not passing that magic string around, because when I get to my website and I go to start up the website, I need to say things like add Redis client right here and add my Redis output cache, and I tell it, go get from the services cache. That's the name of the connection string that you're connecting to. So I have a constant name there, and if I change that name in my constant, it just rolls out to all my services, and I don't have to think about managing these magic strings everywhere. There's a trick to doing this, though, okay? And I want to make sure that you see this little bit here. So this is a class library here. It's Microsoft.NET SDK. I've got a couple things referenced, but that services class down here, it's just a class, right? It's a POCO. But up inside of app host, look at all these package references for all these Aspire things that we're using. And it even references the various projects that I want to orchestrate and run. My migration service, my functions, my Aspireify website, but I also add that common project here. Here's the trick. There's no user interface to do this yet, but if you want to do this, this reference to a class library inside your app host, you need to add an attribute, is Aspire project resource false? By doing that, it doesn't look at the Aspireify common project as a project that it's going to orchestrate. Let me show you briefly what I mean by that. So back here in the app host, right, if I say builder add project, right, I get that generic type, and I can reference projects dot, and it shows me this collection of projects that .NET Aspire sees in the rest of the solution. And this is going to wire up and do all the magic bits to get the things connected so that it knows how to run that .NET project for me. But the Aspireify common project is not in that list, okay? These are projects that were referenced, but because it's not an Aspireify resource, it's not a project that's loaded in my IntelliSense there. It's actually going to load it and use it as a regular .NET resource. So for us as .NET developers, that's kind of the way we expect projects we reference to be loaded. The way that .NET Aspire does it, by turning these project references into actual code bits that we can load and use as types, that's new to us, right? We're not used to seeing that. So that's the trick to making constants or other features that you want to define somewhere else. Get rid of that. That you want to define somewhere else to get that working in .NET Aspire, okay? Let me see, this is the 9.2. We've got some time here. There's one or two other things I want to make sure I show you. Let me come back and maybe we'll take a look at health checks in just a little bit. Yeah, let's do that. Let me go back to the slides and yeah, let me show you here. So one of the things that folks comment on and ask a lot is, gosh, you're using .NET Aspire, that's on Azure, that uses Azure Container Apps. You must be using lots of money to run that, right? That must be an expensive resource because Azure is expensive. I even had somebody, a developer in India, the Western Asian part of the world, reach out and say, you must be spending $1 million a month to run that website. Like, are you kidding? Like, I don't make that much. All of these resources run at very, very low cost. Container apps only run and you only get charged for how much they actually consume and use, how much processor, how much memory. Everything that's a part of this does not take a ton of resources to run. It's very, very small. It costs me less than $20 a month to run. For all of these container apps that you see here, I have a container registry there that manages images of all of my containers. I have, you see my website down there at the bottom. Importantly, you see there's a key vault there. One of the things that .NET Aspire does that we don't talk about a lot yet is that .NET Aspire manages your security connection strings. It manages the ways that those processes start up and hand off user IDs, passwords, service principals. In this way, when you go to deploy, what we'll do, depending on the resource that's being started, we'll either put API keys into that key vault, or we'll set up service principals for those container apps that have been explicitly granted access to work with the resources that you've defined as references, as resources that they can use. You see the managed identity that I have there, MI something or another. It's blurry on the screen, my apologies. But all of that is being defined and managed for you behind the scenes as part of the service discovery features of .NET Aspire. And the goal here is that in the future, as our new publisher features come online, we're going to make that even more secure by default for you so that it's using service principals with no passwords. So there is no way that you might accidentally leak a password on a screen that somebody captures, or it's written down on a Post-it and stuck to the side of your monitor. None of that occurs because it's all service principals without passwords, without API keys, running in the cloud, and where there are keys, they're stored in a key vault, and you don't have access to it as a developer. It's managed by your operations team, and they can change those values in the key vault, and it properly rolls out to the rest of your application system. That's pretty cool. The next thing that I want to show you is, because I have so many of these resources out here, this is a diagram of on an average day, just how much processor was being used by folks visiting Aspireify. It's nothing. I'm using 6 millicores, on all of my containers put together. It's using so little resources because everything's output cached. I've done aggressive caching capabilities. I don't have a lot of processing occurring, so that as folks visit the website, you get some cached content, the processors aren't working, things are sitting in memory and working out quite nicely. But Fritz, how do you get things deployed and out there and onto the big Microsoft Azure cloud? Well, the tool we use right now is called AZD. AZD is the Azure Developer Command Line tool, and you can use this to point to your .NET Aspire app, initialize it, and push it out to Azure. It's real easy. 3 commands. You change into that same folder, you run AZD init. I then call AZD pipeline config. And what that does is it sets up a GitHub pipeline on GitHub Actions so that you can then automatically deploy updates as your project changes, as you make those commits into your main branch, into your primary branch, and it will deploy those automatically. There's prompts that all run at the command line that help you configure that. And the last command that you run is AZD up, and that command will actually go reach out to Azure into the subscription that you want, set up resource groups, and deploy all the features that you've defined. It'll take all of your .NET projects, turn them into Docker containers, push them into your image registry that it's going to allocate, and then deploy and make those containers run using Azure Container Apps. Now, there's a couple other things that are happening just below the surface here that I want to make sure that you know about that are a little bit tricky. Aspireify.net isn't quite as simple as it looks. When you run those AZD commands, and now with the new publisher capabilities that are available in preview with 9.2. I'm not going to talk about those today because they're still in preview. They're changing, they're growing. We're going to have more about those with Aspire 9.3 and Aspire 10 in November with the .NET 10 release. But all of those things generate bicep files. And bicep files are those YAML configuration files that define how Azure works, right? And we all love YAML. I can't stand it. But what I need to do in there that is a little bit tricky to do using the Aspire syntax is I need to bring in, here's the domain names for the project. So once I got my first deployment, I went out to Azure, I went to my Azure Container app, and I set up the domain name, and I had to add these custom domain entries you see in the code on the right there for Aspireify.net and www.aspireify.net, along with the certificate ID, which I've conveniently hidden most of so that I don't dox myself again. So they're all sitting out there, real easy to set up. There's a JSON configuration that you can find in the Azure portal for your container app. Once you have an SSL connection, an SSL certificate defined, and a domain name, you can take a look at the JSON configuration, and it gives you exactly these values you need to drop into the custom domains feature. There is a custom domains command you can execute in app host. You need the same values, and it generates these same values in the bicep. Next feature I want to make sure that I show you is I added some other hooks into the deployment that aren't there by default, and that's really small on the screen. My apologies. If you look at the Aspireify.net website, I put the .NET version, the .NET Aspire version, and I put the SHA for the GitHub commit in the footer of the site. So I have some extra code that I write on, and let me actually go to the running site that I have here. I have some extra code that I wrote into my GitHub action, so it generates those entries, places them in my website code so that it gets generated and placed on screen appropriately. I'll show you what those look like, and then you can take a look at the real Aspireify website and poke fun at that when it hasn't been updated in a while. So let me zoom in just a little bit more. So there you see my version hash. That's a fake version hash for those of you with Leet speak. Running on .NET 9.04 with .NET Aspire 9.2.0 Preview 1. I still haven't, this is the test version before the .NET Aspire 9.2 was released, so I still haven't pushed that version out, but this is what's running locally, and I have the rendered time. You can see that all of those values on the live website so that you can see this is a real website that runs on .NET, runs on the latest version of .NET Aspire. It will soon. It's on Aspire 9.1 right now. But it's out there, it's running, and when it was last rendered, and this one, of course, because I just ran it right now, was rendered right now. So I want to make sure that that's visible so that when you do talk to the folks back at the office, you talk to the boss, hey, I want to check out this Aspire thing. Here's a real website that you can go out to and touch and see it's working live. The next thing that's kind of weird to deal with is these integrations that we have. They show up as .NET packages, and the packages, you can specify a version there, but if you want to get the latest version of that integration package, you need to update your package references inside app host and deploy. Well, I kind of cheated, and I used star references on the package references, so that I have that sliding reference. So whenever there's a new package version of one of these that I want to apply, all I have to do is force a rebuild on GitHub. It'll grab the latest version because I use the star reference there, and it will deploy and use the latest version of Postgres, of Redis, whatever it is that I might need to reference. The last thing I want to make sure I show you is, of course, I used a lot of regions in my code. And it was working out nicely for me, but it's grown so big that separating these things out into extension methods has become a nice way to maintain that. Yeah, thank you. I don't need your pity applause. I use Azure AI Search out there, and here's the thing. Azure AI Search is free for you to use up to 50 megabytes of storage. This isn't Fritz trying to sell Azure. Okay, this is what I actually use. Like, they're not paying me to sell Azure. Well, okay, they are, but this isn't my goal here, is to get you to buy more Azure. This is completely free to use inside your Azure subscription, up to 50 megabytes. And I'm only using 300K of it to index all 400 some articles that I have on the Aspireify website. I don't need to touch and update this for a while. I am in just fine shape with my Azure AI search. It's really easy to set up and use. It's a RESTful endpoint that you can call into and tell it to both index content and search against. Really great stuff out there that is part of this process. But something that I want to make sure you do know that's a little bit tricky, those container images, it deploys them into your container registry, but it doesn't delete them. And you get 50 gig by default in your container registry. If you're packaging and deploying some big applications out there and you're deploying frequently, like I was testing some features here. Look at this. August 17th, I deployed, 4 or 5 times in the course of 20 minutes? Like, that's a lot of storage that I'm eating away at. You're going to want to go out here and clean those up regularly. You're going to want to set up some sort of a scheduled process that takes a look and removes versions that are expired, that are older, that you don't want. Maybe they're not a pinned version that you want to keep so that you can roll back to. It's going to be up to you how you interact with those container images. But be aware, it does not clean them up. They're just out there forever for anybody to pick up and work with, even though Azure Container Apps isn't going to look at anything older, okay? So, last things that I want to show you. Hey, look, there we go. Last things that I want to show you that I've started putting together some content around and that I'm adding onto this. If you go out to your application and you go to /health, it's going to come back and tell you healthy, unhealthy, degraded, and here it's telling me unhealthy, and I know why it is, but I know why it is, but anybody else that looks at this is going to go, what do you mean it's unhealthy? I can go and click around the website and things work. Like, what's the deal? What's unhealthy? So we can enhance our health checks. I should have it locally. Let's see if I can do this. Oh, we need this one. So let me see. I'm going to go over to here, and what did I do? That's fine. Go away. Yes, I do have it here locally. I'm updating the health checks as part of this because I think this is something, right? That's fine. Yeah, sure. That sounds good. Let's go rerun this. We should be all right because I have the things locally. Oh, that could be a problem. All right, let's see what happens. Maybe we'll get lucky. There's a service out there called Health Checks UI that runs in a container that will give you more details of what's going on inside of your application. And I've added it to Aspireify. I haven't deployed it yet, but I've added it in there so that we can take a look at it. And I'm not going to be able to deploy, am I? Still build it. Okay. Can I turn this on? We've got just a few minutes left. I want to show this last demo before we call it. So let's see if I can jump on the network real quick. Black Van CIA. Yeah, connect to that one. Why is the password free candy? Let's see if we can get on here real quick. And Try that one more time and see if it gets out there. Yeah, there we go. All right. Crossing my fingers, hoping this works. This is the part where I've gone off script. There was a script? Thank you. There we go. So all of these things have various health check capabilities hiding underneath of them. And right here is the health checks UI that will show me exactly what's running. Yeah, runtime unhealthy. Come on. It's because it's downloading. It's waiting for the website to run. There we go. So, and I can click in over here and I can see here's everything that's running that makes up my website and whether they're healthy or not. So the website itself is healthy. It can connect to the Postgres database, all my Azure storage things, and to Redis. And it's going to poll and update that every 10 seconds. This is something that for your ops folks, when they're in production, to be able to see these things, why is this running slow? What's misbehaving over here? To be able to have this user interface is extremely handy, right? And you can add it into your .NET Aspire application because we make health checks available as part of our service defaults in all of your projects, okay? I have instructions on how to do this. There's a video coming out the week after next that shows you how to do this. We're adding it in to more of our .NET Aspire documentation so that you can add this. This is a container that's built by this guy Zabrel. See, Zabrel coding. There's customizations in there if you want to change the styles, the logos inside that container. It's up to you, and it's easy to customize. All right. That's about all the time I have for this presentation. I don't think I have a resources tab on this. I have a lorem ipsum. Hey, that's nice. Yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for coming out. You can find me at C# Fritz on all the social media networks, on GitHub, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter. I'm not going to call it X. Blue Sky, C#Fritz.com. I'm in all the places. The website is aspireify.com. I'm sorry, aspireify.net. Ooh, I nearly messed that up. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to speak with you here at StirTrek. I'll be around for a little bit, and you'll see me out in the halls if you want to ask questions, talk a little bit more about .NET Aspire, about Blazor, about anything Microsoft Developer Tools. Thank you.